that done. And now I'll go share the page.
Charlie, I'm looking for that baby model and I'm having trouble. Where is the baby model?
I can't tell you from here. Uh, it's probably under additional histo- histology or additional organ slides. We'll come across it.
Okay.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Because my computer is frozen. All your images that I can see of well, April and Amy, they're motionless. I've heard it happens, but that's the first time it's happened to me. I'll give it a couple of minutes and push every button I can. Something happened. Okay, you're moving again. Well, you're moving at 10 times speed to catch up. Okay, now, will you see my cursor?
Yeah, I see it.
Yep, okay, good. And what I need not do is go back up here past week 14. Everything that I had collapsed for today, uh, you can open it, I suppose, uh, or I don't think you can open it actually. Uh, so after we finish today, since we don't need it, I'll open it up because it is needed for the final examination, which covers everything. So I'll open whatever's there. They're short now because where's most of the information? It's still going to be down here. Okay, respiratory system. We are almost done with that, but you need to look at a respiratory system model, a model that has lungs, trachea in it. Uh, I can tell you this: if the image I'm going to show you on the test isn't in this group from 3, 4 here to the bottom, it's not going to be used. Okay. Uh, I may use a different image, but of the same thing, on a different color, or something like that. So there's no in lecture. We do have some images, but uh, no. There's not going to be more drawings. Okay. There's going to be images for the first 33 tissues. And the only tissue I'm looking for here, and it's not in this lecture, is the lung. So let's get to where these things are. The integumentary system, uh, open it up. No. An image like that, you should be able to name the things that we named. We didn't name everything. Okay. So very little to do here. Under nervous tissue, you recall that neuron that was from the spinal cord. It's not in here, okay? Or here, or here. You just had 10 questions on the spinal nerves. And so I would not expect any more questions for here on the practicum. I would expect, though, that you would get questions there on the final examination from reading the text. It might be boring, but if you're feeling uncomfortable when you're studying for the final exam a week from today, you actually should go back and reread the entire text of everything here. It won't take you as long as you probably think it will. Looking at recordings, I think is a waste of time. Frankly, I think it's for people who just weren't there or they want a backup or to be reassured of something. Okay. The study guide, I know you've seen this a million times, and some of you have turned this into me. This is extremely important to do. To get all these definitions and functions in your head. For the first 33 questions, you're going to be asked to identify these types of tissues. So a tissue like hyaline cartilage is a cinch to be on the test. The hyaline cartilage will come up. I've shown it to you before, show it to you again. And it'll come up on the test. And what is it? Where is it located? You'll have only one choice that's correct, and other choices that, of course, are not. The hyaline cartilage could be, for instance, in the throat area, okay, but not the epiglottis, which is elastic cartilage, and not the ear, which is elastic cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is also at the articular surfaces of the joints, covering them. Okay, I could do that with, of course, every one of the rest of these. But if you have filled this out completely and taken it to heart to remember it, you're going to do very well on the test. If you haven't, well, then you're not going to do very well on the test. It's really as simple as that. The handout for the organ system, might as well delete that now. That doesn't have links to anything particular. Tissues. This is the first one I'd say in the group that we looked at so far. You really have to hone in on, and also tissues part two. So if we look at part one, it'll start off with the epithelial tissue. And here's some micrographs. I would not use this one because it does show some columnar shapes within it. This diagram is great, but I'm going to be using images and not diagrams. So here's an image here. You need to recognize this as tissue and what type of organ it might be found in. Here's a glomerulus, and this would be the kidney tubules. The way to approach this is not, oh, gee, what's this? Okay, well, maybe I know, maybe I don't. But the way to approach it instead is to know that this is kidney, okay, by the way it looks. Once you know it's kidney, you've got to remember the various parts. The glomerulus, the Bowman's capsule. And then you got to remember that the Bowman's capsule is simple squamous. And everything is surrounded by kidney tubules, and they're lined by simple cuboidal. Go from big to small. What is the organ? Okay. Then what is the structure? Then what is the tissue? Even though I ask you to do that when you can, sometimes you can't because the image immediately goes to the tissue itself. So here you look at and you see cuboid cells. They're lining something, a duct in this case, or the lumen of a duct. Well, epithelial cells do that. They cover or line. And so what you have here is simple cuboidal epithelium. And the absolute only place we've seen simple cuboidal epithelium is in the tubules of the kidney. Here's the glomerulus increased. You recognize that, you actually first should think this is kidney because that's the glomerulus. And the glomerulus is surrounded by Bowman's capsule. And Bowman's capsule, in turn, here is simple squamous. Here's the picture of the villi. You just have to remember this one. We've seen it so many times. The epithelium would be a simple columnar because the epithelium of the entire GI tract except the upper esophagus is simple columnar. So you look at this and dang, it is columnar. It's one layer, it's simple columnar. The only place we have seen simple columnar, not to say that it's not present elsewhere in the body, but for our purposes, the only answer is the small intestine. Transitional epithelium still seems to give people trouble. It's multi-layered, and so multi-layered means it's stratified. This is either stratified squamous, in which case the outer layer would be flat, which it is not. So move on, it's not stratified squamous. It has to be transitional, capable of stretching. We found in the ureter and also found in the oviduct. Here's the pseudostratified. I think it's usually one of the prettiest looking slides, and sort of looks like it's got a crew cut, if you know what that is from the old days, or a butch haircut. It's got all these hairs up the top, cilia. Okay. That gives it away really though. That's all you need to see to go with pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. But you got to know where that's located. And it's always going to be found and only found in the respiratory tract. So we find it in the larger part of the respiratory tract, like the trachea and the larynx, and we find it in the nasal cavity. And that was the end of that. The second part of that is right here. This part goes into the connective tissues. Absolutely, you need to know that that's a relar connective tissue, and it's associated with the organs throughout the body. Any place where there's a non-stiff, non-rigid connection. So the connection between, for instance, the skin and the dermis, which is not a part of the skin. Connection between I'm sorry, the skin and the hypodermis. The hypodermis is not a part of the skin. So I got to back up and emphasize that the dermis is part of the skin. Skin is epidermis and dermis. Then it's underlain by the hypodermis and that by muscle. And you'll find a relar connective tissue in there. It always looks something like this. It always looks like you threw up some sort of a rustic barrier and wire to keep something out or to keep something in. Adipose, I don't think gives anybody any trouble. It's sure to be on the test someplace, however. Adipose or fat, and fat we can find in any part of the body. We know it's in salivary glands, for instance. We know it's in around the muscle. Anywhere in the body we can expect to find adipose. That's a vein, by the way. Dense regular connective tissue is tendon. So once we know tendon, we think it runs from one spot to another in a straight line. And so the fibers are roughly in a straight parallel arrangement. I told you the other day the waviness is due to the way it's cut. Do not depend upon color to identify the tendon. Everything else is the same, but the color can vary. Now here's skin. Here's the epidermis here and here. Why do they look different? The top layer of epidermis is flattened dead cells, the stratum corneum, and the other 4 layers are down here. The basement membrane would run here, and then the area down below all of this is the dermis, dense irregular connective tissue. Embedded in the dermis is another organ. This one is the pseudoryphanous gland. This has actually, and I'm not trying to throw something in at you at the last moment, this has compound cuboidal lining its ducts. In other words, 2 layers of cuboidal cells lining the duct. The pseudoryphanous gland is also known as the sweat gland. The secretion is the sweat. The type of gland that it is a Merocrine gland. Merocrine glands are those that secrete a fluid only. So you put all that material together when you look at something. Don't just stop. Just spout out everything in your mind, at least, that you know about it. You know, this test coming up before, you'll have 80 minutes on it, but it's the test that takes the least amount of time on the class average, usually around 50 minutes. Here's compact bone. I don't think I need to waste your time with that one. However, cancellous bone, you just need to identify it. Just to identify it. Hyaline cartilage. You know, I said we'd have a picture of it. To me, it always looks like bubbles coming up through a plastic matrix or fluid. The chondrocyte is the cell associated with the center. The lacuna has the chondrocyte within it. Hyaline cartilage is the most common type of cartilage, and all cartilages are avascular. They don't have a vascular system and never develop one. The elastic cartilage in 3D, you have to use your mind to get 3D here because it's just a 2D picture. That's probably a rod. It's probably a rod that you're looking at, or it could be a thickness going away from you as it might be in the ear. We find this in the ear, elastic cartilage, and we find it also in the epiglottis. Those are the only 2 places that we've talked about that are important. Okay, we're down to here. There's a recording of it. I could check and see how many people have taken the practice quiz, even though I'm afraid I have to uh, try to bang heads to get people to take it. There seems to be a reluctance to take practice quizzes. Maybe people think they're not ready yet, so they put it off. Maybe they put it off and then they forget to take it at all. But if you haven't taken the practice quiz and you need a refresher, please take the 2 practice quizzes here. The endocrine bonus quiz I took down, but I put it back up. I'm going to use the points that you may have on there to add on to your score that you got today when I can get around to it, probably late this evening. My website has all the information on it as well. Sometimes it's actually easier to work off of it, especially for Unit 4. Unfortunately, I don't know if you see this or not, but I have I think it's green this time, a band going across. Do you have that band that says stop share? Or am I the only one who has it? You are screen sharing, stop share. Do you have that band wherever my pointer is? Okay. The problem is we lost April. She's had enough. And she's the only one who answers me. So I don't know. I guess I can just say whatever I want. That's as far as we'll end up going. But if you do use the web page, you can use it for the histology slides, and you can work from the slides here. Please review all of these slides. All of these slides. You and I just reviewed the epithelial. That was tissues number 1. We did the connective. That was tissues number 2. And the muscle are here, the 3, but you've been tested on that before, but it's good in case you want to review. The neuron slide. If you take a quick look at this, how many different slides do you see? You see about 40. How many slides are going to be on the test? About 33 possibles. So they're all within here. They're all within here. Okay. The study guide, we've seen it before. That's the thing that you'll be turning into me, I believe. Yep, same one. Really, can't emphasize enough. Know these definitions and functions. The histology photos is a link to the same set of photos that were on my website that I took you to just a moment ago. So please use this and go through all of the photos at least once. Okay. There are similar photos, additional photos in the rest of the information below. Organ systems. This is really the last 2/3 of the test. So most of this is found in the text, the parotid gland, the Stensen's duct or the parotid duct, but you also need to know it's a salivary gland. It secretes salivary amylase. It has acinar cells, a term we use first with the pancreas. Acinar cells secrete enzyme. This is an exocrine gland because it has a duct. There's so many questions you can get out of one thing. What type of exocrine gland? American gland because it secretes fluid only. This is straightforward, I hope. This is not quite straightforward. The esophagus is located underneath the trachea, so it has to be pulled by this probe out from underneath. The stomach and its parts, straightforward. This is not a good picture to ask things like cystic duct, but it is good for duodenum, duplicae circularis, the spleen in general, but you got to know the function. The function of the spleen is to get rid of red blood cells, to help in combat antigens, and also stores platelets. The pancreas, know that it's an endocrine gland producing insulin and glucagon, those being produced by the beta cells and alpha cells, respectively, which are located in the islets of Langerhans. Stomach and duodenum. This picture could easily be on the test, but only for these simple uh, structures here. It's just one of those that you have to sort of study and look at or see ahead of time. You can easily identify small intestine, I hope, okay, and the duodenum coming right to the stomach or from the stomach has to be the first part of the small intestine. You've seen this as a model, okay, and here it is as the picture. Please know the parts of this. Know that the lacteal is part of the lymph system. It gathers lipids from the small intestine. The villi are coated with an epithelium, which is simple columnar because it's part of the GI tract. The large intestine, the haustra are the pouches, which are formed by unequal contraction of three bands of muscle called tineae coli. You can't see all three at once. Here's the valve between the small and large intestine, the ileocecal valve. The cecum we consider the first part of the colon. We don't consider the appendix to be the first part of the colon since we consider it's essentially non-functional. Do want to know the appendix, however, for the test. This is a tough one until you sit and look at it for a while. You can speed that up by looking at this picture, and you see small intestine. That's pretty easy, okay? And this is the ileum, the last part of the small intestine, going past the ileocecal valve, which would be approximately located here. And then here's the cecum down here, and the rest of the colon or large intestine above it. Let's head it up. It's going to cross over, and it's going to start to come down. And we can't follow it any farther. Definitely know the diaphragm, prime mover of respiration, and know the gallbladder, storage of bile salts from the liver, and the liver itself. And I've listed for you for that about 4 or 5 important functions, but there are 60 known functions for the liver. This model, not too difficult actually, right dead center is the hepatic portal vein, bringing blood from the small intestine, spreading it out through the liver. The blood is distributed through the lobules, regathered by the central veins, and will exit through the vena cava and then exit into the regular circulation. There's also an artery here that brings blood that is not from the small intestine, but blood that's circulating throughout the body, good blood to nourish the liver itself. And the little white strip doesn't look like the falciform ligament that you're thinking of, I'm sure. It doesn't look like the falciform ligament that I've seen either, but this model still represents it. Here's this white strip. It goes all the way down and through to the other side, from the outside in, to function to support the liver. Here are the lobules of the liver. Here's a quarter section of a lobule, which is enlarged here. Here's the hepatic portal vein coming in. This is a bile duct, and this is the hepatic artery that we talked about. We didn't call it hepatic artery, we said arterial blood. Hepatic portal vein brings untreated blood in, distributes through this maze lined by glandular epithelium. All glands are composed of glandular epithelium except the posterior pituitary, which is also the neurohypophysis. That's nervous tissue. When I stop and emphasize a sentence like that, it's an important thing to remember for the test. And that's it. Then I put some more additional models in, which I thought were good ones. I should have written additional models with labels. Okay. Now, these should become familiar to you because we just saw them, I think, last week. But here's the follicle in the ovary. The ovary is influenced by FSH. FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, is produced by the anterior pituitary and causes the development of a follicle to full size, as we see here. Then the eruption of an ovum. Okay. If pregnancy occurs, estrogen is given off by the mature follicle and also by the structure that the mature follicle becomes, the corpus luteum. This becomes this, not instantaneously, uh, but you'll get the production of estrogen from both, but especially from the corpus luteum, you get progesterone. Both of these feed back to the anterior pituitary to cut off any further delivery of FSH until the pregnancy is over or terminated. At that point, the corpus luteum will become corpus albicans, and corpus albicans is scar tissue. A kidney and a ureter, nothing there. Need to know the names of the parts here on this model of the throat or trachea. Okay. Everything here is hyaline cartilage with the exception of the epiglottis. Here's the spleen that would be made of glandular epithelium. Here's the rostrum. It would be lined by simple columnar. Here's the tinea coli, which would be made of smooth muscle. Here's the mesocolon, a serous membrane. So you can see that sometimes you don't just want to stop with naming something. You want to give a description of it in the terms that we've used. That way, it's automatic when you get to the test. The ovary, the os fimbriae, and the oviduct. Those are the terms I'll be using. I'm not going to use the alternative terms infundibulum, uterine tube, or fallopian tube, just the terms that you see right here. This is a slide that I should probably eliminate. Location of the prostate gland, we'll see that further on. This slide is really a duplicate of the one 2 slides ago, except that it doesn't have the oviduct pointed out. The adrenal gland, right here, if it's a gland, it's glandular epithelium again. It has a medulla and a cortex. The cortex produces corticosteroids, such as cortisone and aldosterone. The medulla produces the epinephrine or adrenaline. Just to show the bladder does have rugae in it, so it's able to distend or enlarge. Here's a better picture of the kidney and the ureter. The bladder is down here. Now here's the baby. Okay, the baby model. Here's the thymus gland. The thymus gland is an endocrine gland. The thymus gland produces T cells, which fight infection, set up the immune system, is the way we usually refer to it. This disintegrates by the time you're in puberty. There are other glands shown here, but that's the only one that's important for this model. Not the same as thyroid. There's the spleen, just mentioned its function. Here's the mesenteries proper to hold everything together. Okay. This one, you just need to start your cursor or pencil or mind on the glomerulus right here. Okay. And then follow the material, the plasma, through the proximal convoluted tubule, ascending loop of Henle, ascending loop of Henle, and then the distal convoluted tubule to the collecting duct. Realizing that this set of arteries and veins that are going perpendicular to everything else mark the distinction between the cortex, which is up here, and the medulla, which is down here. You'll notice that the loop of Henle is located partially in each, the medulla and the cortex. These are the cortical radiate arteries, the term that I'll be using on the test. They are also known as interlobular arteries. Here's the arcuates, and here's the lobar arteries bringing blood in. The cortical radiate arteries, all of these, are located in the cortex. How do we know? Because here's the arcuate, and it distinguishes cortex from medulla. This is pointing back over to here, and this is not a great shot, I don't think, of the greater omentum back here. This model of the liver, gallbladder, little slice of stomach, the pancreas, and the duodenum is pretty good. The storage for bile salts is in the gallbladder here, which it comes in, but it can finally also exit through the cystic duct. Exiting from the liver that produced it, bile salt exits through the hepatic duct. Where these two come together, it's the common bile duct. Unlabeled, the ampulla of Vater is right here. On the skin slide, you see here, the epidermis runs from the pointer to here. And then in pink, I believe, down to here is the dermis. Sudoriferous gland sebaceous gland, produces sebum. It's a hologram gland. And what kind of tissue is it made up of? Well, of course, glandular epithelium. This is the pharyngeal tonsil. Here's the palatine tonsil. Both are part of the lymphatic system. This model of the nephron, again, rather schematic. Blood comes up the lobar artery, travels along the arcuate, in this case for a short distance, goes up the cortical radiate. Coming off the cortical radiate is the afferent arteriole, going to the glomerulus, and leaving is the efferent arteriole. The efferent arteriole spreads out over the entire loop of Henle, which we just looked at. And in doing so, it picks up, it reabsorbs material that are in the loop of Henle that are still valuable to the body, and leaves behind the nitrates, nitrogenous waste, uric acid, things that the body wants to get rid of. The stomach, mainly shown because as an internal organ, it is composed of smooth muscle. The only really internal organ that's not composed of smooth muscle is the diaphragm, which is composed of skeletal muscle. Okay, I've got a recording from last week. It was split into two parts. It took me 3 tries to get the first part. I hope somebody eventually looks at it. That was a lot of time put in, and that was because we weren't recording. The second part is again the same. Moving up higher, there's a practice test on histology. This one's text-based, and here is the last thing I'm going to show you, so I'm going to hold off on it for just a second. Coming down, you do not really need to reread lymph, okay? Yes, I said the tonsils are lymph nodes. You need to know that, I guess because I said it, and because I said the laryngeal tonsil is a lymph node. You need to remember that too. Recording, you can skip or use if you need it. There's a practice final exam. If you have not taken it, it is exactly like the exam you're going to get with a different set of questions, of course. And then the answers to that exam are below it. So there's nothing to click. You answer the questions yourself, and then you go and take a look at the answers. These general review recordings, okay, are yours to look at, but actually they should be repeats because I took them from last semester and I put them in here. When you do 2 recordings, you always say something different, and they might be in a different order, but it's the same material. So it may make the list look longer, but not necessarily so. Then we have a recording. We'll have another one for today, and a complete list of the terms for the final. That I've shown you a couple of times, so if you need to take a look at it, fine. If you have a question, email me that. Now I'm backing up. This one was an old test. This one was actually given for the first 33 questions. I know you've seen it before, and I think it'd be better to go back at it at your leisure. But this is kidney and a glomerulus. We also had kidney tubules, but we didn't ask that. This is liver. Looks like a bunch of sand dollars, okay, upside down with the central veins showing here. Okay. Functional unit of the liver is the lobule. Here's the hyaline cartilage that we saw a moment ago. Remember, bubbling up through molten plastic. That's how I see it. With the hairs, here's pseudostratified ciliated collider epithelium that we would find in the trachea because that's part of the respiratory system. Here's a nice picture of the salivary gland. Glandular epithelium. We see lobes and divisions for lobes. Skeletal tissue, skeletal muscle. Here's the areolar connective tissue. I said looks like you threw up some sort of a barrier, in this case a sheet, with a bunch of wire on it to reinforce it. Here's our neutrophil, a type of white blood cell. Here's the cracked windshield that is my interpretation of the lung, okay, the lung tissue. The neurons with the glial cells around them. This slide gives people trouble. I don't care how many times I'll show it to you. Half of you will probably miss it. This is the seminiferous tubule. Okay? There are tubules here. We don't know of anything in the body anyway that's spherical, like a bunch of marbles here, or grapes. So these are tubules coming out towards you. There are a few cell layers thick, but that's not going to be stratified epithelium. That is the division process, just like the skin, except not going outward, going inward. And the final division product is a spermatid. Here's the skin itself, and it divides upward. This is the epidermis, here to here. A little bit of dermis peeks in at the bottom. Function, well, has many functions, so we have to read the questions carefully. Protects from abrasion is the only one that fits. The eye. Here's our small intestine again. We just saw this slide. Here's a follicle with an ovum inside of the ovary. That's a sex organ, and it's also an endocrine organ. This one is the pancreas. It's both an endocrine organ and a digestive organ. These are islets of Langerhans where the alpha and beta cells are stored, which produce glucagon and insulin, respectively. These are acinar cells. These are the ones that produce pancreatic amylase, an enzyme. Here's the tendon, which I told you before, don't count on the color. Okay? And don't count on it being perfectly straight. Just a little wavy bit like this is fine. That's due to the cutting. Here's from the kidney, the simple cuboidal cells lining a kidney tubule. This is the colon. Colon, large intestine, part of the GI tract, must be lined by simple columnar epithelium. Okay? And these clear areas, the clear areas are goblet cells producing mucus. And the last slide here that was given to a class as recently as last semester. This is the taste bud. of the tongue, of course. Okay, anybody think of a question, have a question? Because if you know the material that I just went over, you're going to do so well on the test. Can't imagine that you wouldn't. Okay, well, no questions. I guess we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
Bye, Chris.
Bye.